Hi, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. Today, we have two very special guests with us. The makers of a documentary called Have You Heard About Greg? Greg is with us today, Greg O'Brien, who has had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's now for several decades, I think it is, or maybe 2 decades.
10 years, about 10 years.
10 years, I'm sorry, 10 years. And you look so young, Greg, that I was reading in your bio that you had you were, I think, were you in your 50s when you were diagnosed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm about 60, and
You're about 60. Okay.
I'm 71 now.
Okay, and with him, his partner in crime, we have with us Steve Ecclesine. He is the producer of the documentary. But the great thing about these two is that they were childhood friends and were reconnected many years later to start this documentary. So you were just talking about this, Steve, to me before we started the live. Tell us about how you got reconnected first with Greg.
It was an unusual set of circumstances. I had gone back for my 10th year high school reunion, and then I went back for my 50th high school reunion. So while I was there, one of Greg's and my childhood pals came up to me and said, "Have you heard about Greg?" And in those 5 words, they changed my life. So basically, I found out that Greg had written a book called On Pluto, Inside the Mind of Alzheimer's. And I got in contact with him, and he said, "I'm going to be coming out to Scottsdale, Arizona, right after the first of the year to give a speech to 400 caretakers from the Aging Life Care Advocates group." And I said, "Great, I'll bring cameras. Let's hook up again. It's a blind date after 50 years." And so I came out with the cameras and met Greg again. We kind of looked at each other strangely, and then we sat down and started talking. And it's like with anybody who you've had a friendship with, it's like it can be a 5, 10, 50-year gap, and you just pick up where you left off and start talking. And I loved how he handled the crowd of 400 people. And I said, "There's something here that's just magical." I thought, well, maybe it's a short film. Steve James had done a short film with Greg before, and that was up. Then I had seen that, and I thought, okay, this is great. But then he starts turning over his Rolodex and starts handing me some of these top people in the fight against Alzheimer's. And so I get over, and there's Lisa Genova, there's George Vredenberg, there's Rudy Tanzi. There are these icons, these amazing people who sat down, told me the truth. And then we had to take all that material back, just like any documentary, where if you're going to go make a documentary, you don't have a script, you don't have a schedule, you don't have a budget. You just basically go. And so I started shooting and figured I'd figure it out. But I didn't know what I had until I really sat down and started looking at the people that he had introduced me to. And I said, this is magic. This is information that people need to get their hands on.
So what's so wonderful about the documentary is that you capture Greg so well. And Greg, what I love about your message, both on Pluto and within this documentary, is you're really talking about living with Alzheimer's. It's not dying with Alzheimer's, it's living with Alzheimer's. And your life and your spirit is captured so beautifully in this documentary. Just tell us a little bit about that. How, I mean, obviously a diagnosis changes anyone's life considerably, but with yours, it feels more like a heartwarming story. It doesn't feel like a tragedy, which is wonderful and inspiring to so many who watch it.
I don't want it to be a tragedy or a train wreck, because if that's the case, people will feel pity as opposed to listening and learning. I think that you may know that I lost my maternal grandfather, my mother, my father, and paternal uncle to Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And I was at the deathbed of both my father and mother when they died. And I just, as a journalist, said, and we never talked about cancer, called it the big C, and never talked about AIDS. And while I was there with my mom on, her last few minutes, I just said, we're going to bring this disease out of the closet. And it's not fun, kind of stripping yourself naked, and particularly when you're close to 70. So that's a joke. You could laugh.
And that's not on camera. Okay.
But
Maybe more people would watch though.
right, I'm not 35, but it it, uh, it propelled me as a journalist to kind of do my job, and I promised my mom that I would do that, and so I started writing down everything, because before my parents died, at least my mom, I was starting to experiencing the symptoms of short-term memory, and not recognizing people, and loss of place, and loss of self. And I was scared shitless, if I could say that. I guess it's too late to ask. But but what propelled me again was my mother, who was the hero of my life, who taught me how to live with Alzheimer's. And it's, despite the stereotypes, and I'm looking at notes here because I can't wing it anymore. But despite the stereotypes of Alzheimer's, it's a 20 to 25-year course. So I was diagnosed about 10 years ago, but I was diagnosed early. And this is the importance of early diagnosis now. I had to, because as a journalist, I couldn't multitask anymore. And one of my best friends was my personal physician. And he got me in touch with experts who did the brain scans and SPECT scans, and the diagnosis was early onset Alzheimer's. None of it was a surprise. And I remember sitting in his office with my wife when he gave the diagnosis, and I felt like the tears coming down my cheeks. And I grabbed my wife's hand and I said, "What about the kids?" And Alzheimer's is really about the kids, the next generation. My train is left. There's no magic wand for me. And I think, as you know, I also have prostate cancer that's advancing. But it's about my children, my grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren now, and everyone else's children and grandchildren, to try to realize that this is a disease that over a period of time you can live with, but get an early diagnosis. I was lucky, if that's the right word. I was forced to, but people live in the shadows in fear, and they don't want to get a diagnosis until they're 10 years into it.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because that's a really important point, and one that often comes up. So from your perspective, what did an earlier diagnosis give you? How was it helpful in terms of living with this disease?
Well, it gave me a roadmap. And then as a journalist, in writing about, in which I wrote from probably 2,000 pages of notes when I wrote everything down and did my research. As a journalist, I was fortunate enough to be able to connect with some of the top Alzheimer's experts in the world, and they helped me. I was talking to them to write the book, but they helped me on my journey by giving me strategies, and I wanted to share the strategies with others. As the great Bugs Bunny once said, "Don't take life too seriously, because nobody gets out alive." And I wanted, in faith, hope, and humor, to teach people how to live with this.
I think, Laura, there's an interesting point that Lisa Genova makes in the film, and that is that somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the doctors who are involved with uh, neurology, the baby boom generation,
We have 2 very special.
they do not tell the doctors do not, as a matter of course, tell the patient that they have Alzheimer's, which of course can only be proven in an autopsy at the end of the road. but they suspect that a person has Alzheimer's, but they will not tell them because there isn't a drug on the marketplace or any place for them to go at this point in time. And I think that that's so important. And Lisa underscores it by saying, by not telling the patient that this, or the family, that this is in the throes of happening, then they are not preparing properly for what is to come.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, what I'm trying to do is to get some running room for the great pharmaceuticals that are working to find a cure. But at the end of the day, a cure may be, how do you put off these symptoms until maybe you're in your 80s? And that may be because we haven't cured cancer, and
Yeah.
you know, we haven't cured heart disease, and but the pharmaceuticals deserve a lot of credit for the hard work. And Steve, maybe you could pick up
And that's,
on.
I mean, that's a big difference, the difference between, you know, diagnosis. I mean, if we can stave it off for a decade, that's 10 years of your life, which is huge, right? I mean, I wanted to touch a little bit about you know, obviously, Greg, your family's been majorly impacted by Alzheimer's, and you have a genetic link to the disease. But Steve, you too have Alzheimer's in your family. You lost your mom to Alzheimer's as well.
Okay.
So it's just like, when you think about, you two weren't connected for 50 some years, you came back together because you heard about Greg, but yet you had been impacted by Alzheimer's as well. So tell us a little bit about, was this mission as well part of the reason, because you were impacted as well?
I think very much so. I think that had my mother, let's say, passed away of cancer or some other disease, I would have loved to have reconnected with Greg, but I would not have been so immediately inspired by the work that he had already done. Sitting down and writing a book is a murderous proposition. It doesn't matter what it is. And he sat down and, excuse me, bared his soul and wrote about the childhood that I remembered and some of the
That took,
favorite.
by the way, about 3 years, so
Yeah.
it wasn't overnight.
And wasn't overnight, and is now translated into Chinese and Indian and various other languages, and it's a classic. And as I had gone through that experience with my mother, and I don't think I learned a thing back then. And so this to me was an opportunity to go back and sort of bring it around full circle and really learn what this was all about, because it had taken my mother and my grandfather before, which I found out subsequently. And so this became a labor of love and a mission that, you know, had to be done. And so I think, Laura, that this is the perfect edutainment. We are educating people while we are entertaining them.
Mhm.
And I think it's the easiest pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really comes through in the film is just, Greg, how close your family is. It's you living with this disease, but we see your family around you at all times. So tell us a little bit about the role and the dynamics and how they may have changed once you received a diagnosis.
Well, and I wrote about it, and I have some notes here. When I was diagnosed, the doctors and the lawyers said that you can't own anything anymore. There's a 5-year look back for a nursing home. And you need to tell your kids, and you need to tell all the people you do work for, all your editors and so forth, because it's just the right thing to do. And hardest thing was to tell my kids. And so I kind of summoned them all. They were out of the house at the time because they're older. Summoned them all to our house on Cape Cod under the guise of dinner at a favorite restaurant by the sea. And so they were all waiting because, you know, they're impatient. Daddy, come on, let's just go. What do you do? And I was in the bathroom, and I felt like Luca Brasi at The Godfather preparing my speech, you know, on the day of the daughters. And I was just so nervous. And so I went out, and finally, my wife, just Mary Catherine, my wife for 45 years, I always call her my first wife, but it's my only wife. That's but I also call her now the warden because she's in charge, not me. But it's a love term. And so Mary Catherine said, "Your dad needs to tell you something." They were all there when my mom and dad died, and I said, "You know what? Your my mom was the last one to go, and I said, look, what took your grandmother I have now, and I've been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's." To which Brendan, my oldest boy, who's a writer producer in Boston, said, "Well, Dad, that explains a lot." And the whole family were talking about it behind the scenes and wondering what's wrong with Dad. He's not the outgoing guy that he used to be. Can't remember anything. He can't remember people. He drifts out. What is going on with him? And then my son Connor, who can kind of get to the point, said, "So you're losing your mind, Dad?" And I said, "Yeah, it's time for dinner. Let's go." And so if I could tell a story, this is just family for people to understand the dynamic here, and it's in my book. When a couple of days later, we're supposed to go to Coronado off San Diego for a family reunion, and I got out there early with my son Brendan, just the two of us. And the doctor said, I named him a power of attorney, and he was in charge of everything, in charge of me. So he didn't want to hear about it. And I said, we got to talk. And we're on the balcony of this beautiful hotel in Coronado. And I said, all right. So I went and got the 85 pages of notes that basically said I was losing my mind. And Brendan said, I don't want to hear about it. It's bullshit. And I said, no, you have to. So I would read him parts, and another emotional part, he goes, I don't want to hear about it. It's bullshit. And he dropped some F-bombs. And I read some more. And finally he grabbed my 85 pages of medical notes, ripped them into shreds, and threw them off the balcony and said, this is bullshit. This is F-bomb bullshit, Dad, because I know it's true. And he buried his head on my shoulder, and we cried. And so that's what it's like as a family. This journey's not easy. And there are, I don't want anyone's pity, but I pick and choose my moments when to talk and when not to talk, because I don't want people to see me when I'm down, I'm out of it. And, but that's how the family came together.
And it's very powerful when you watch the documentary. Steve, you capture that so well, just the support that Greg has and the role of the family. Steve, tell us a little bit about like why, what do you want people to walk away with when they watch this documentary?
I think that that the Alzheimer's diagnosis is such a tragedy. And the word Alzheimer's there is a huge stigma attached to it. That immediately, if you say, oh, this is a film about somebody who has Alzheimer's, it's like I'm turning the channel. And it's because I don't want to, and that was the way I was. I looked at my mother and thought she's just old, and whatever. No, no, no. I watched her disappear while she was living. I watched her mind disappear, and it was only until I could get her in front of the piano that came back, and she was able to play. And we were affiliated with this group called Music Men's Minds, which you may or may not know about, Laura. But it's individuals who are musicians who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, and they have a band called the Fifth Dementia, and it's out here in Hollywood, and it's a bunch of old studio musicians, elder studio musicians who get down, and as soon as you put them in front of the charts, and they start playing, and
Like
it's
Glenn Campbell.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Glenn Campbell in I'll Be Me. So that was part of their cognitive reserve, and what they've retained.
Tony Bennett, right? Most
Tony
recently.
Bennett, and
Yeah.
knows the words of the songs. 1,000 songs. Can't tie his shoes, but anyway. It's I'm hoping that people come away with a sense of hope. I'm hoping that they have been touched by the film, which I know they will be, and that they basically, well, the three goals that Greg and I set out for ourselves was A, to get people talking about it again. B, if indeed they get talking about it again, then they'll increase the funding for this, because right now it trails AIDS, it trails cancer, heart, whatever. And this is the one that if we do not fix this in the next 20 years is going to come along and bankrupt the entire Medicare system, and totally put just affect our entire way of life. So it's get people talking, increase the funding, and to the individual who takes this message personally, the next time they go in to see their doctor, ask about their brain health. Don't give me a checkup from the neck down. Let's talk about the neck up, because that needs to take place. People's awareness about their own brain health, in which case we are affiliated with the Brain Guide, which is a product of the Us Against Alzheimer's group. And it's a great way to 10-minute test that you can take at home. You can take in conjunction with someone you love, who you're concerned about, just to kind of give you a little bit of guidance in terms of what you should be paying attention to. So I hope for that the audience comes away refreshed and renewed and keeps that
No,
message in the back of their head.
another purpose of the film is to expand the umbrella. The word dementia, which is a scary word, is the umbrella word for all sorts of cognitive issues like Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is the most prevalent. But um, to some extent, it's all the same thing. It's loss of self, and I've had experts who told me that you can have Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia at the same time. Just like you can have cancer and other diseases. And so I'm part of my journey is to expand the understanding of this disease. And understandably, Alzheimer's is the most prevalent, but dementia is the umbrella, and people need to be concerned about all forms of dementia.
And that's one of the themes at Being Patient that keeps coming up over and over again is this a misdiagnosis. It's the default is first it's MCI and then it's usually on the road to Alzheimer's, but a lot of times it's a different dementia that a lot of doctors don't know how. But one of the things to diagnose, but one of the things that you pointed out is I remember having a conversation with a pathologist who told me after autopsy, about 75% of cases were diagnosed and labeled as Alzheimer's, but they're actually Alzheimer's and another type of dementia, right? So really understanding neurodegeneration is, whether or not one starts first and then you end up with another, people don't know that yet. But, Greg, one of the things that is pointed out.
By the way, not because I'll forget, but I think that's so true. You can have Alzheimer's, another form of dementia, and I have no feeling in a lot of parts of my body, which also could be a form of vascular dementia with Alzheimer's, so it's all the same. And we need to talk about dementia and understand Alzheimer's is the most important, not important, excuse me, the affecting more people, but understand that dementia of any type is serious.
So, and one of the things in the documentary that you bring up is you had a series of head injuries that very possibly could have accelerated the road to Alzheimer's. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
The doctors have said yes, it did. I had a bicycle accident without a helmet, and with my son and younger son Connor when he was younger, and his friend, and we went up to visit my mother who was getting to the final stages of Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's, it's the same thing with me. You don't have an internal thermostat, so you overdress and underdress. And it was summer, and she gave these kids these really heavy sweatshirts, and my notes here, and so, but my son realized that my mom was sick, and then I told him, look, you could take them off and I'll put them over my bike. I had no helmet. They had helmets. And so I laid them over.
This was on the way home from visiting the mother. Mother gave him two heavy sweatshirts to wear. The kids put them on. And as they're riding back home, they say, "Dad, can we take these off?" Yes, they did. Drape them over his bike, and
Steve's kind of the puppet master. Have you understood what Greg meant to say? But that's okay. We're like an old married couple, kind of finish each other's thoughts. But so in Alzheimer's, it brings you back sometimes to childhood. And I remember when I was a child, I would ride no-handed. I'm in my 60s and started riding no-handed. And something told me inside that something bad was going to happen. And I saw the sweatshirt slip off the handlebar into the spokes, caught the spokes, threw me about 10 feet into the air. And because of that premonition, which could have saved my life, I had my hand in front of my face. And when I hit it, cut through to my knuckles. And then my hand fell away and I hit my head twice on the pavement. And that's what the doctor said unleashed a monster. And later I had a car crash in which my head hit the windshield and cracked the windshield. And so and then plus I played football and baseball in high school and college, and at least college. I didn't play football in high school, but took a lot of hits. So
Yeah. And you have a genetic link, so that
Yeah.
you have a lot of things stacked against you in terms of, Alzheimer's.
Right.
So I just want to check in with you, Greg, on how you're doing today. I mean, we've interviewed you previously on being patient, and you're obviously a very masterful communicator with your journalism skills. But you are making references like, I have to write this down, I don't remember. How do you feel like you're doing today?
On a bad day, not well. There are times and I'm not proud of this. Okay, there were twice in my life I tried to commit suicide because I know where this is going. And I tell people my brain is like an iPhone, still a sophisticated device because of the grace of God and a high IQ and cognitive reserve. And there's another word called, let's say neuropathy, that's that neuroplasticity. I think that's what I'm reading here, where the brain on its own can reconnect. And, but having said that, my rage is out of control. My wife had to go into counseling for that, where the rage goes. I'm withdrawing more and more now. My 60% or more, maybe 70 now, my short-term memory can be gone in seconds. I don't recognize people. If you put me in a room with people that I've known all my life, I won't remember who they are. And in addition to that, my body, because this is what Alzheimer's breaks the body down. I just had, as well as the mind, the mind is the window to the body and the computer for the body. I just had in May spinal surgery where they cut me from my neck to my spine and fused everything. And I lost a 7-hour operation with anesthesia, not good, and lost 7 pints of blood on the table and started a heart attack. And now the neck and the spine is the next thing, and still no feeling from my knees to my feet. And as I said, there's the stereotype about Alzheimer's and dementia is so damn wrong. There's no two types that are the same, but the doctors have told me, look, you have limited capacity, but if you tell your brain you're going to focus on communication and writing, which the writing will probably be the last thing that goes with you, your body, because it can't handle anything else, is going to break down in other ways. And I thought it was Steve, but it wasn't. I told someone that it was, it's like the movie 2001 Space Odyssey with the diabolical computer HAL, where they said, could you go forward? Could you go in reverse? Could you go faster? And HAL said, I can't, there's only so much juice. And so my juice is on the way out. And there are times, again, please no pity, when I go to bed at night, I ask the Lord to take me home. I'm ready to go right now.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, thank you for your honesty. I think I admire that. And I think that it's important, the fact that, and this is conveyed so well in the documentary, the fact that this disease, you're living it, but you can be so honest. And, Steve, hats off to you too for being able to convey that in the documentary, because I think it's important. If only more people really could be like Greg in the way, in his really his honesty. It's certainly not roses, but you do the best you can. And with the best, there are times where you have to, you're not so good. And I think it's
But
very brave of you.
you have to have strategies. I don't want to hold you up here, but but that's important for your viewers and the early diagnosis and being around experts like Dr. Rudy Tanzi at Harvard and Lisa Genova. It gives you strategies. And so my nickname in the past used to be the senator from Cape Cod, but now I don't want to be around people. So if I go in a room where there's going to be a lot of people, what I'll do immediately is look for the exit door. I'll go around and spend 2 seconds shaking hands, not knowing who people are. And then I leave the room and go sit by myself for an hour and a half. And I'll do that at large family. And so they'll say, oh, I saw Greg. He looked good, but they
Right.
don't know that I'm sitting outside by myself in a date.
Yeah, and often when people are good communicators like yourself, that I'm sure you face that comment all the time. Well, you don't seem that bad, and yeah, it's
No,
what.
but then a lot of I have no continence. I don't want to get gross with you. I have no continence now, and I put up wearing adult diapers for a long time. But then people, when they say, "Oh, you look so good," and to which I would say, looks and IQ are gifts from God, the universe, the Almighty, whatever you want to say. Nothing to do with Alzheimer's. And I tell people as a joke, and sometimes they get mad. I go, as a matter of fact, I'll look better in a coffin than you do right now. I know that's a shitty thing to say, but
The honesty again.
well, you
Steve.
have no filter, so.
It's a thing, Lauren, that I think, Deborah, I'm sorry, that comes across really well, is that every single person who we present on camera is in effect telling the truth.
Mhm.
There's no scripted, oh, gee, I've got a checklist of 7 things I need to incorporate. No, it's a conversation that we're having. It's unscripted. These are experts who are sharing tons and tons of information that they have learned through 400 clinical trials that did not work. And in that process of elimination, we're getting closer and closer, hopefully, to something that will work. And one of the things that Lisa points out, I think, is very important, as well as the big pharma companies, is that they really need to focus their clinical trials on people who are at the preliminary stage, as
Mhm.
opposed to after it's full blown.
And that's happening more and more. There's a lot more trials now that are reaching for those pre-symptomatic people. But Steve,
Real quick,
yeah,
Lisa, who's one of my best friends, she has a new book. It's
we've
a new.
interviewed her about it.
Oh, you did? All right. Okay.
Yeah. We'll give it another plug though, because it's
All
an
right.
awesome book. I love that book.
The difference between getting old and Alzheimer's, and it's recommended reading, I think, for everyone.
And yeah, and that's an excellent book, and it does answer that question: is it normal aging, or is there another problem? Right. So she does such a great job. Steve, tell us, how do people see the documentary if they want to? Where is it showing, or how can people access it? Have you heard about Greg?
Uh, we're having our first film festival showing that's going to take place in LA at a place called Filmocracy. It's going to be on Thursday to Sunday. If people want to go on Filmocracy, FILMOCRACY.com, they will see how they can, for $7, basically pay and have it streamed into their house. It'll be up from Thursday morning till Sunday night. So that's the
Okay, we
first.
can post that link as well.
That is the first piece of business. If they happen to be in LA and want to come and see Greg and me in person for some strange reason, that'll be on Saturday night, the December the 11th, over at the Music Hall Theater in Beverly Hills. Now, after that screening, we basically are looking at a theatrical release in the middle of February. And that'll be when people all across the country will be able to go down to their local movie theater and see it in person, because it's a different experience when you're with a group versus you're sitting at home and watching it, just like any movie is. But this one really affects you and achieves the goal of making you care about someone other than yourself, and start to think about, as a result of us putting a human face on this terrible disease, start to think about your own brain health.
And then I'm just getting my producers asking a question about the LA December 9th to 12th world premiere.
Yes.
Is that what you were just talking about, or
Yes.
okay?
Yes,
Okay.
that's film festival called Filmocracy.
Okay, Filmocracy. So I think it needs to go on Netflix or something at some point, right?
From your mouth.
Okay, attention, Netflix, HBO, all of the above.
Apple. We think that Apple, with the Swatch watch, and being able to tell people about their blood pressure and heart
Yeah.
rate and all that stuff, that
Amazon Prime too,
yeah,
right?
both. We hope.
Okay. So, Greg, Steve, thank you so much for sharing more about the documentary. Have you heard about Greg? We'll post the links to what you just mentioned in this talk if people want to know more. Do you have a website too for it?
Yes, we do. It's hyhag.com. Have you heard about Greg?
Hey, Steve, just real quick, mention, because you can't do anything without supporters.
No,
The farmers who have been so helpful.
we have an interesting set of circumstances whereby my head of marketing is a gentleman named Brad Ball, who had been the head of marketing at Warner Brothers for many years. And he came up with this idea of, why don't we go approach the big pharma companies, because this is right in their wheelhouse, and they need to get people down to clinical trials. They need to get more information out to people. And so we had this wonderful conglomeration of Eli Lilly, Biogen, and Eisai put up money for the marketing and are supporting us in helping to get the word out. And so that's how we're going to get the word out for the screenings in February. So I
Well,
thank
good luck to both
all
of
those
you.
people. Thank you very much, Deborah, for giving us this wonderful platform that you've created and have done so much great work on. And I enjoy watching your podcast. So
Thank you so much. And Greg, always good to see you as well. Wishing you all the very best. And we will follow your pursuits with this documentary. And congratulations to both of you for making it.